From beaching his car in the gravel before the race even started, to crashing into more drivers than I can count, Lance Stroll doesn't exactly have a legendary reputation. His incompetence on track isn't helped by his arrogant, rich kid attitude that makes him impossible to like. But does Lance deserve all of the hate he's been getting? And should he really still be racing in Formula One? We're going to start with Lance's most recent blunder in Brazil, which could possibly go down as one of the most embarrassing things to happen in motorsport history. Let's just set the scene. The conditions in Brazil were wet, and the drivers were completing their formation lap before the race was set to start. But as Stroll approached turn 4, he was carrying too much speed. So when he hit the brakes, his car locked up, sending him spinning off the track. The front wing of his car clipped the barriers, and whilst embarrassing, this wouldn't have been the end of the world if he didn't then proceed to make one of the most brain-dead moves in F1 history. Instead of reversing like his race engineer suggested, Lance instead decided to try and rejoin the track by driving through the soaking wet gravel trap.
Enter the pit lane when we come back.
Beach.
As if it couldn't get any worse for Lance, the fans watching the race started chanting Drugovich at him. For those of you who don't know, Felipe Drugovich is the Aston Martin reserve driver, so the fans are basically mocking Lance and calling for his replacement. The post-race interview only made him look even more deluded, as he blamed his error on a brake failure.
I've never felt that in the car, so maybe there was a brake failure problem.
Now, even if that was true, it doesn't explain why he decided to drive into the wet gravel. This isn't even the first time Lance has crashed on the formation lap either. Back at Monaco in 2022, he slammed into the barriers under similar wet conditions.
And hitting the barriers as well, Lance Stroll through Massenet.
So, it's clear that Lance has a talent for crashing before the race even starts. But what about after the race is finished? Well, at the 2017 Malaysian Grand Prix, he did exactly that, targeting Sebastian Vettel as his victim. The race was over, and the drivers were completing the cool-down lap, but apparently Lance decided this was his chance to prove himself as F1's biggest clown. He began slowing down his car, drifting off the racing line right into the path of Vettel, who was cruising past at a sensible speed. In an instant, Vettel's car was turned into a tricycle, and he sounded utterly bewildered on the radio.
Is that possible? Stroll is not looking where he's going.
Sochi 2021 is a perfect example of how incredibly incompetent Lance can be during a race. Despite now being his teammate, Vettel was once again Stroll's first target. The conditions were wet, but because Vettel has more talent in his right pinky toe than Lance does in his whole body, he was gaining on him at a blistering rate. But as he attempted to overtake him around the outside, Lance displayed that he had the situational awareness of a lemon by letting his car wander left, squeezing Vettel into the wall. As if this wasn't enough, he then clipped Vettel's left rear tyre with his front wing. But things would get even more hilarious as the rain started to increase on the next lap. Lance was clearly struggling, but the rain master himself wanted to stay out on track, believing he could handle the conditions. So just watch what happened.
Can you stay out on this condition? Can you stay out?
Yes!
That honestly couldn't have been any more comical, but it doesn't stop there. As he rejoined the track, he lost control of his car once again, this time hitting Pierre Gasly, causing him to spin out. So, in the space of 2 laps, Lance had a record of 4 incidents. Not even Lance's own pit crew is safe from his driving either. In 2020, he embarrassingly overshot his pit box, running straight into a member of the crew, sending them flying backwards. Lance didn't even seem apologetic on the radio, instead just blaming the incident on his cold brakes.
Sorry about that. Brakes were really cold.
While those incidents certainly were hilarious, the next one was downright dangerous and could have gone horrifically wrong. It was lap 22 of the US Grand Prix, and Fernando Alonso was gaining rapidly on Stroll. As Alonso went to make his move on the main straight, Lance reacted at the very last second, jolting left into the path of the Spaniard. Terrifyingly, Alonso was almost sent airborne, before he then slammed into the barriers, while Stroll's car sustained heavy damage, coming to rest in the middle of the track. Now, you'd be expecting Lance to take accountability for this crash, especially since we can literally see him turn his car into Fernando's. I mean, even the stewards labeled the crash as Lance's fault, so what does he do? Yeah, that's right, he blames Alonso, saying he left him plenty of room to the left.
Yeah, I mean, I left him plenty of room on the left. Yeah, he got really close to me, and yeah, we just made it contact, so.
Even after becoming Lance's teammate, Fernando still wasn't free of his wrath. He didn't even make it past turn 4 of the first lap of their very first race as teammates before being crashed into by him.
Colour sights, and there was trouble, Martin.
Two Aston Martins touch.
If Lance had been just a few centimeters further forward, both of their races would have been over. There's only one thing that fears Lance more than his fellow drivers, and that's the crash barriers when he shows up to a track. I mean, the number of times he's put his car into a wall for an utterly stupid mistake is beyond belief. We had Singapore 23 when he was pushing far beyond his talents, Saudi Arabia 24 when he made a rookie mistake, and Baku 22 qualifying, where he crashed twice in the space of a few minutes. But my personal favourite has to be at Monaco in 2023. The conditions were wet, and on the approach to turn 5, Stroll lost control of his car, scraping the barrier before driving down the escape road. After rejoining the track, he decided to use his car as a bumper cart once again. As he ploughed into a barrier at the hairpin, destroying his front wing, he then used all of his generational talent to drive over his wing, before colliding with yet another barrier. Even Stroll was fed up by this point, parking his car at the next corner and calling it a day. I mean, that is just world-class stuff right there. It's not just Lance's inability to drive a car that pits so many fans against him, but it's also his spoiled rich kid attitude that makes him impossible to like. Just look at his interview at Baku this year, where he's just straight up rude and disrespectful.
First podium, is that what you're hoping for tomorrow, just to make progress?
Yeah, we'll see what we can do tomorrow.
And do you think you've got a strong race car underneath you?
We'll see tomorrow.
And you only need to look at the comments to see how many people agree. Lance's interviews only get worse when things don't go his way on track, and the best example of this was at the 2023 Qatar Grand Prix. After being eliminated in Q1 for the 4th consecutive race, Lance was clearly furious. He only had his lack of talent to blame, but instead of acting maturely, Lance took it out on those around him. He threw his steering wheel out of the car, before then shoving his personal trainer out of the way, a move which was universally condemned online. But the cherry on top was his now infamous post-race interview.
What are your emotions right now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry for the language there. What is not clicking for you behind the wheel at the moment?
I don't know.
And how does this change your mindset for the weekend? Is it now a test session? Are you going to go for it in the sprint?
Keep driving.
And the thing is, nobody will stop Stroll from acting like this because his dad quite literally owns the very team he's racing for. It really doesn't matter how badly Stroll performs or how horrible his attitude is, because as long as his dad owns the team, he isn't going anywhere.